Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to the football season and the Mark Richt Show, brought to you by Williamson Automotive. I'm Joe Zagacki alongside my broadcast partner, Don Bailey Jr. We are headed down the home stretch in training camp. The kickoff of the season is right around the corner. It's been hot, it's been sultry. The camp has been really good. We'll talk about the camp in just a moment. But as Mark Richt starts his second year, Don Bailey Jr., he starts on a 5-game winning streak. That's how the Hurricanes finished last year.
Joe, I think that's very important to note because the confidence built to an all-time high after Miami won the bowl game. I think that everybody understood, especially the last 5 games of the season, of what the expectations were of their new head coach in Mark Richt. Everything started to come together. It proved that it had a big effect because of the great recruiting class that was signed, but they're going to pick up where they left off at the end of last season.
Down the stretch last year, Miami averaged 38 points a game in their last 5 games, outscored their opponents by 18 points per game. Those are strong numbers.
They sure are, and those 18 points were helped significantly by Manny Diaz in that Miami defense, who really came on strong. They held almost all of their opponents below their average for the season last year, which is very impressive.
The defense, as you mentioned, held opponents to 18 points per game. They were tops in the country in sacks, tops in the country in tackles for losses.
Something that emulates what Manny Diaz wants, an aggressive defense. He likes the tackles for losses. He loves the sacks. He likes the pass breakups. This year he's searching for takeaways and points.
The bowl game, Miami defeated West Virginia, first bowl victory for the University of Miami in 10 years. And I think that really has given Miami, propelled a lot of momentum through spring football, through training camp. But the bowl win at the end of last year was very significant.
Well, I think it was simply because of the fact that it put the icing on the cake. It was a top 20 opponent. It was a very formidable opponent in West Virginia. They came in with a high-powered offense. The defense shut them down. Brad Kaya, in his final game as a Hurricane, put together a great second and third and fourth quarter. Miami made big plays. The running game was working, and you really saw everything come together. And then it was topped off by a big victory.
All right, so that got us into training camp. We have a quarterback, which we'll talk about coming up in our next segment. But let's discuss training camp overall. It's been a really good camp, 5 weeks of training camp. A lot of emphasis on teaching and execution.
I think what you really see is what a phenomenal job the conditioning team did, the trainers did, and also your strength and conditioning and nutrition, because you went through practices and nobody was lagging behind. There was nobody being pushed along. Everybody understood the tempo that was expected. Everybody hustled through every single practice. And the thing that you saw more importantly was that there was great improvement from the tempo from this year's training camp, from last year's training camp to this year's training camp.
Training camp has been very, very competitive. Let's take a look at the best of training camp so far, brought to you by UL Sports Medicine. We'll get you back in the game.
Practice like a champion on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Practice like a champion.
Let's go.
deciding factors?
Well, focus, discipline, and accuracy. You know, he showed up focused every day on his job. He was disciplined in his fundamentals, his footwork, his reads, his passing fundamentals, and then he was hitting his target, and he did a very good job.
You took your time with this decision. Did he make it easy on you to make, or was the competition level just that high?
Well, he did, because he did stand out above the rest. It wasn't like unbelievable amount, but it was apparent that he was having the best camp. And Evan did extremely well. Evan did it extremely well. So, but I felt like there was a little bit enough of a difference to feel comfortable that Malik's the guy. And then the other, the young guys, they really are still, they got to know what to do and kind of own it for a while before they can really compete at a high level at that position.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Mark Richt Show, brought to you by Williamson Automotive. Joe Zagacki alongside Don Bailey Jr. Don Bailey Jr. was no stranger to trying to figure out quarterbacks and quarterback controversies and sorting out quarterbacks. Not that they had a controversy here. Coach Richt did have to sort out the quarterback situation. Went in with 4, has distilled it down, and the guy that's going to take the first snap for the University of Miami, as of right now, announced earlier this week, is veteran junior Malik Rozier.
Well, in all honesty, Joe, that's the sequence it should be, correct? Malik has been here. He's got the most experience. He's got the most game experience. He's the only player on the roster that has had a start in college football, and he has improved greatly. He improved from the spring to the fall, and then he improved every single day in camp. So, and that's what's going to have to happen through the entire season. Every week and every practice, he's got to make sure that he is constantly improving, because that's what's expected of that position, and you are in a leadership position. You have got to set the tempo for the entire team as a starting quarterback.
The offense has enough weapons to help out the quarterback. Let's start with Mark Walton in the backfield.
I love him. I mean, really, when you think of the offense, that's what we're going to talk about this season. It's Mark Walton's offense. It may be Mark Walton's team. He's that kind of leader. He's that kind of tough guy. He leads by example. He's verbal when he has to be. And he does not want to come off the football field. And I think the hidden secret on Mark Walton really is how great a receiver he is and how good a blocker he is. So I expect great things out of Mark Walton. I expect him to join the club with Edgerrin James as the only 2,000-yard rushers in Miami history.
You mentioned receiving, had a wonderful touchdown last year in a wheel route against Duke in the final home game of the year. 25 touchdowns in 26 career games. He's got a GPS to the end zone. A year ago, Coach Richt said, we don't have enough speed at wide receiver. And everybody said, what? You don't have enough speed? He brought Amon Richards in. He was fabulous. Amon's had to battle through some muscle problems, but he'll be okay. But there's been an infusion of speed with Harley and Thomas.
Well, when he said that they didn't have speed, now when you see this speed, you understand what he was talking about. Harley and Thomas both have an extra gear. When you look at Harley, came from St. Thomas. He's a guy that was coached extremely well in high school, and he understands the game, but he is so competitive. He already said that he wants to break all of Armon Richards' records that he set last year. I love that attitude. Thomas comes from Illinois. He's a guy they're both basically the same size, but he's a burner as well. And Miami hasn't had that much speed around here in a long time.
A guy that I think all the young players should just follow around all the time, just duplicate what he does, is Chris Herndon.
Absolutely. He's an example in the classroom, he's an example in the weight room, and he's certainly going to be one of the most valuable players on the field for the University of Miami this year. He's gotten bigger and he's stronger. He's trimmed down his body fat. He's going to be extremely important for this Miami offense, especially around the goal line.
Herndon's coming off a career year. He came up just shy of 30 receptions a year ago. I think he's going to double that number this year. All right, how about the offensive line? They got some size in this offensive line now, and they've got some experience, and it's 4 of the 5 guys have played together for most of last year.
Well, there were some injuries at the end of last year, and it worked out very well, honestly, for this year. Tyler Gauthier was at left guard last year. He's starting at center and has been very impressive to me through the entire training camp. You've got McDermott out at left tackle. He's really the leader of that room. He's a very smart player This will be his 4th year at Miami. He played guard last year. He had played some right tackle in the past, but he's the guy that's providing the leadership. And Stacy Searles has done a phenomenal job of constantly teaching these young men about techniques. They are starting to understand it. They're buying into it, and I think you're going to see a greatly improved offensive line and a very cohesive unit at that.
All right, that's a look at the Hurricanes offense. We'll continue with a look at the Hurricanes defense coming up next right here on the Mark Richt Show. The Mark Richt Show, brought to you by Williamson Automotive, continues now. Joe Zagacki, Don Bailey Jr. Hurricanes getting ready to open up the season September 2nd against Bethune-Cookman at Hard Rock Stadium. Can't wait for that. Can't wait for the Canes to run through the smoke. Can't wait to watch this defense that returns a bunch of guys, and they will be on the attack.
They are on the attack, and that's Manny Diaz's MO. He wants his defenses to attack. He wants to create problems, and he wants them to make a living behind the line of scrimmage. He wants to disrupt the entire play anytime that he can.
All right, let's start in the front seven. And it begins up front with Kendrick Norton and R.J. McIntosh.
I love those two. I think they're as good a combination that has been around here in over a decade. I think that they set the whole tempo for the defense. They're both in great shape. They're big, they're strong, they're physical, and they're also going to let those defensive ends rush the passer.
Well, you mentioned the defensive ends, and Miami has a bevy of defensive ends from Joe Jackson, who's had a great camp,
Yes.
Demetrius Jackson, Trent Harris, Chad Thomas has worked really hard, Scott Patchin in the mix as well. So they've got some pass rushers.
All of those guys, plus a couple incoming freshmen, are going to play. But the thing is that they've got the quality depth, and in today's college football, where you can run up to, an offense can run up to over 100 plays, you really need to platoon that front seven. You have to make sure that those guys are rested. And let's remember this, Joe. Pass rushing opportunities come when you stop the run.
Let's go to the linebackers. A couple of freshman All-Americans there. Shaq Quarterman, freshman All-American. Mike Pickney, freshman All-American. Zach McLeod has got a ton of talent.
I think Zach McLeod is the guy who's going to continue to make his name more well-known. He's bigger than the other two. He's fast. He's physical. And he just got a little overshadowed last year. But listen, that linebacking core starts and stops. And really that defense was Shaq Quarterman. He has unbelievable leadership. He had it last year as a true freshman. But here's a guy who examined his game, took off 15 pounds, made a decision that me being lighter is going to help my endurance, it's going to help my speed, and it's going to help me physically get through a long, grueling season in the ACC. And Shaq Quarterman, I wouldn't be surprised if he's an All-American again.
All right, the secondary's been exciting. Dee Delaney comes in, Javonte Dean comes in, Trajan Bandy. Those three guys have worked really hard. Of course, you got Malik Young, who's really acrobatic, and then the two safeties back there, Jaquan Johnson and Sheldrick Redwine.
It's a great group. When you look at it, you see a lot of skill, you see a lot of speed, and you're starting to see that group gel together. I liken them to an offensive line where you have to have excellent communication. All of that entire group has to understand what the offense is doing. The safeties have to make sure that everybody's in the right alignment, but you have talent there. It's going to take a little while for them to get together. That's why it's fortunate Miami's opening up with a Bethune-Cookman so they can understand what the game speed's going to be like, but I'm very impressed with that secondary.
Let's go back to Dee Delaney for a moment, the fifth-year player from South Carolina, from the Citadel.
The thing that he brings is he brings leadership, and he's very, very disciplined. He came in, he's picked up the terminology, and he's been looked at as a leader. He's the oldest guy in the room. He decided to come back and take on an additional challenge. That tells you the personality. Hey, I can go to the National Football League, or I'm going to come to Miami. Nothing's guaranteed. I'm going to compete and raise my level.
The Canes had 38 sacks a year ago, over 100 tackles for losses, 19 turnovers. That's where Manny Diaz wants them to get better. Not only forcing more turnovers, but get some points off of those turnovers.
Well, you and I had fun calling those points off of turnovers at the Georgia Tech game last year, right? They come in bunches, and when you look at this defense, they always are chasing the football, and they're alert. Their radar is on all the time for a takeaway or to scoop and score. And that's something that has been ingrained in them since the day that Manny Diaz and that staff took over, is the importance of the takeaway. And when you think about it, it's going to possibly change the entire season this year if they're able to up that number even more.
Okay, the season kicks off right around the corner, September 2nd, 12:30, against Bethune-Cookman at Hard Rock Stadium. Don and I will take a look at the rest of the schedule as we continue on the Mark Richt Show right after this. Welcome back to the Mark Richt Show, everyone. Brought to you by Williamson Automotive, Joe Zagacki and Don Bailey Jr. All right, the Hurricanes will kick the season off here on September 2nd at Hard Rock Stadium. Miami begins the year ranked 18th in the nation. Also, at the ACC Media Days, the Hurricanes were selected to win the Coastal Division.
Well, Joe, there's a lot of pressure being put on the University of Miami this year and every year since the early 80s, and this year is no different. Mark Richt has prepared this football team like he's prepared no other. They're in shape, they're conditioned, they've been well taught in the off season. He's built a lot of the teamwork, and a lot of the grouping have come together. Every individual group of players have come together, and they're ready for a great season.
All right, the beginning of the season sees Miami playing Bethune-Cookman at Arkansas State, then another little trip to Tallahassee to take on Florida State, Toledo, and Duke. That's early on in the season.
Yeah, it's a pretty...
Any of those games stand out to you?
Yeah, any of them. Yeah, well, I can tell you the one that does. It's amazing to me is, we kick off against Bethune, and then 14 days later, not to overlook Arkansas State, but listen, it's Florida State. It gets here quick, and we all know that's an 8 o'clock kick. But more importantly, I think the schedule's important. I think when you look at it, you're going to be at home in your first game, which is always something you want to have happen. But Arkansas State's going to be a tough road trip. You got to fly into Memphis and bus over, and your starting quarterback is going to be facing a hostile environment for sure, and that'll get him prepped up for the next week where we go to Doak Campbell Stadium.
All right, little nugget, the Toledo quarterback led the nation in touchdown passes a year ago. All right, so then October, you have a Thursday night game against Georgia Tech. We're going to have a big ceremony that night for the Hurricanes. 5 players will be honored that night. Also in October, Miami will see Syracuse, and on the road at North Carolina. That'll be a big game.
Well, Georgia Tech, let's talk about the offenses. Georgia Tech, that's always the option, which you thoroughly enjoy calling a football game with that. But Paul Johnson gives everybody a challenge. Fortunately, Mark Richt has had his way with Georgia Tech while he was at Georgia, and now while he's at Miami as well. Syracuse is going to bring in an explosive offense. They're a team last year that put up a ton of points, so it's going to be interesting in October as well.
Chapel Hill is always a interesting trip to the University of Miami. They have a new quarterback this year. Then down the home stretch, Miami at home with Virginia. Of course, the big non-conference game, the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame come marching in. And then Miami finishes the season at Pittsburgh the day after Thanksgiving.
Well, let's not forget the Notre Dame game. I think that
and Virginia Tech.
That's right. Virginia Tech will go to them. Bud Foster is had one of the best defenses in country, as well as Manny Diaz did last year. That'll be a big defensive battle. And you think of Notre Dame coming to South Florida to play the Miami Hurricanes. I think every television and every fan in America will be zoomed in on that game, give Miami an opportunity to make up for that close game that they lost last year at Notre Dame. But it's going to be interesting. And then you end at Pittsburgh. Now, what's the weather going to be like in that deal? It's going to be late November, the Friday after Thanksgiving, and it's going to be a very, very important ball game for Miami.
Hurricanes last year won 9 games and were within a hair's breadth. A fumble recovery here.
That's right.
A little play there of winning 10 or 11 games.
Well, that's where you want to close the gap. You want to make sure that when you're in those close games that you're able to flip those 1-point losses or 3-point losses or 5-point losses. You want to be on the winning side of that. And I think that conditioning has a lot to do with that. And you've seen, as well as I have, that this team is in the best condition that we've seen in years. They've gotten bigger, they're more physical, and that's going to pay off in the later games during the season.
All right, Don, the Canes have a great head coach. They've got a quarterback in place. I can't wait for it to get started. September the 2nd, you and I will be side by side for a great Hurricane season.
I'm certainly ready for it.
Okay, for Don Bailey Jr. and head coach Mark Richt, I'm Joe Zagacki. We'll see you next time right here on the Mark Richt Show. So long, everyone.